Hey everybody, thanks for joining our webinar today on Canon Experience. We're going to give Zoom a minute or so to let everybody kind of filter in here because it usually does take a minute. And while we're waiting for that to happen, if you don't mind dropping in the chat kind of where you're dialing in from, what city, state, country, always love to see where people are dialing in from. See the familiar names in the chat, of course, as well. Reno, okay, I know we've got at least a couple folks from Reno joining. Boca Raton, Northern New Jersey. I went to NYU. Know a lot of folks in Northern New Jersey. Austin, Cambridge. Hey, Scott, I'm right in Boston. Did I see Deb's name? Hey, Sarah. San Francisco. Nicole. Hey, Felicia. All right, a bunch of people from San Francisco. Nice. Amazing. Allentown, PA. I went to wrestling camp in Allentown, PA in high school.
Where haven't you been, Phil, at this point? You're like, I've been here. I went to wrestling camp. Like, where?
I don't know. Definitely some places. Oklahoma. I haven't been to Oklahoma.
Okay.
Haven't been to Ohio,
All
actually.
right.
So we definitely got a couple winners here. I have been to Memphis. Amazing.
I love it.
Well, thanks everybody for joining. It's great to see, yeah, familiar faces, people from kind of all over the country. Um, if we haven't met yet, my name is Phil Strazula, and I'm the founder of Select Software Reviews. I know many people have joined a couple of these sessions at this point, and so thank you so much for supporting our webinar series. Maybe you're on our newsletter, etc. My background is I started my career off working in technology, and now I run SSR, where our mission is to help people find and buy the right HR technology. Around 100,000 companies a month research what tech they should use on our website. And then we have this really amazing service where you can talk to somebody on our staff, one of our advisors, totally for free, one-on-one, and get bespoke help to figure out what ATS, HRIS, HCM, payroll, etc., that your business should be buying. We've got an awesome topic today and a couple of great panelists here as well. I'm going to do a quick agenda. We'll do some housekeeping and then we'll just sort of launch into this. One of the things I'll mention is that please, if you haven't been on our webinars before, we have this really amazing dedicated networking happy hour where we basically stop about 35 minutes from now. Everybody can share their LinkedIn URLs and you can network. You can connect with a couple of people who are also interested in the topic of the day. Please hold off on sending your LinkedIn URLs in the chat until we actually do that. It just makes things a little bit cleaner. So what's our agenda today? So we know that hiring has gotten much harder. Candidates expect more. I think it's fair to say that attention spans are shorter, and a poor experience can quietly hurt your brand without you even realizing it. Today, we're going to unpack what a strong candidate experience looks like in 2025, how your team can align tools, people, and processes to get it right. And we've got an amazing panel here with Tom, Carrie, and Dan, each bringing a different perspective on what candidates really want and how employers can differentiate themselves. I'm going to do a quick intro on each of our panelists, and thank you guys so much for joining, being willing to share your insights. It's really amazing to have you all here. Tom is one of the founders of Pinpoint. The idea of Pinpoint came about when Tom was leading a coding cohort and received hundreds of applications. He needed a fast, flexible tool that would make it easy to identify the right candidates and give them a great experience. And out of this experience came the idea for Pinpoint. It's an applicant tracking system to help companies improve their hiring process. And it's fair to say I'm a Pinpoint fan and have been for quite some time now. It's a modern ATS. It's sort of the canonical example of a modern applicant tracking system. It simplifies the complex hiring for organizations managing multiple streams of recruitment. It also gives you the flexibility, control, and ease of use you need at every step, from planning to attracting, selecting, and onboarding candidates. And I've actually asked Tom a little bit later on. Everybody's talking about automation, especially in recruitment and the candidate experience. And I think we're going to talk about how we got to keep it human, but we also want to understand how do we drive efficiency. And so we're going to do like a 7 to 10 minute snippet there to actually see what are some of these automations that you can leverage in your recruiting process and your candidate experience to gain efficiencies. And again, we want to make this as specific and tactical as possible so people can walk out of here with real things that they can actually do their jobs better. Carrie, thank you for joining us again. She's the founder of the Abrachi Group, co-author of two books, The Way of the HR Warrior and Whatever the Hell You Want. Carrie's mission is clear. She wants to empower people to excel. She has over 2 decades in HR leadership, embodies a passion for transforming workplaces into thriving ecosystems. And Dan, or Dan from HR, is an HR content creator, author, and speaker. He's got 350,000 followers in the HR community. He's built a reputation for explaining the inner workings of corporate America using his trademark direct, no nonsense approach. He's been in corporate America for 22 years, working as an HR VP for companies such as WebMD and Spotify before transitioning into working as an HR consultant. So thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to everybody here. We always love to see the comments, the insights in the chat as we go along. Please feel free to keep that lively. We're going to offer everybody on here SHRM credit and HRCI credit. The session is being recorded. We're going to have the live networking, which is always a hit. People have gotten jobs out of that. People have built all sorts of random connections through that. So please stay tuned for that. About 35 minutes in, we'll have live Q&A. And really what we're going to get into here is insights from the experts, the good and the bad of candidate experience, why it matters, drop off frustration points, the evolving expectations with a new generation, where AI and automation can enhance and hit our candidate experience, and how do we empower teams to act as brand ambassadors. We're going to kick things off with a short poll just to get a sense for where people are at, what they want to hear about throughout our conversation. Please take a quick moment to answer that. And as the answers roll in, I'd love to just kind of throw up a jump ball here to each of our panelists and get a feel for what you think differentiates good from bad candidate experience. And anybody can start. All right, I'm going to put Carrie on the spot.
I was like, look how polite we all are. Like,
Yeah.
no, you go first. You go first. You go first. Um, I think honestly, a company that responds to you, I can't believe I'm still saying this after like maybe 10 years or something, but a company that responds, that actually listens to you, that it's a culture match. I think that's still so important, no matter what technology we have around it. How are you still connecting with them? And how are you showing them that I heard you and we're a really good match? And then also sometimes you could say we're not a match either, right? Because I get you, I know who you are, and you would be a really great fit here. But that not talking to anyone and ghosting, I just see someone ghosting. I don't know, I know all of you in HR, that's what we hear about all the time, right? No one ever got back to me. They won't even give you an automated message. Like it damages our brand as HR all the time because everyone's always looking for a job and they have a story about how someone ghosted them and never talked to them. So that's what I would keep saying.
100%. Tom, I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, sure. Echo what Kerry said. I think from my perspective, transparency is kind of right at the fore these days. I think candidates just have a much higher expectation of being able to kind of self-serve and learn much more about both the role and the employer themselves without needing to speak to someone, without needing to invest time in the process. Like we should be spending as much time as possible, kind of really thinking about how do we preemptively understand what's a candidate going to want and how can we give it to them in a manner that they're going to engage with, right? It's actually not that difficult to do. People just need to put more effort in. And I think the difference we see in conversion when folks make an effort to just preemptively address those questions is just tremendous.
Dan, anything you want to add to the conversation here?
Yeah, I think the one thing is just really managing expectations and really being upfront with the idea that candidate experience is going to mean two different things based on the audience. So what the candidate experience is for the candidate and what the candidate experience is from the company perspective. And those two I'm finding with more experience don't always align.
Yeah, 100%. I know, Carrie, you kind of started this conversation off with this whole ghosting thing, which I feel like can probably happen like throughout kind of any part of the experience. I remember from my interviewing back in the day, sometimes you do a super day, right? You're in the office for a full day and you like never hear back, which is insane to me. That happened to me a few times actually. What are other kind of common drop-off points, areas where candidates feel the most frustrated by a lack of touch points, communication, transparency?
From what I've heard, and I love the chat, which is like, we have tools. We're going to talk about tools that can help you with this. So you don't have to drop off people. But I think where I've heard the most ghosting is I apply and it goes into a void. So just that one is where I hear the most of the most people talking about the ghosting period. But I'm probably sure the one that hurts the most though is that I've gone in, like you said, like I've gone in for a full day interview and then I don't hear anything. So you get the most people saying, I apply and I never hear anything. And that's like, ugh, stupid. But when it hurts and I could almost shed a tear is when I interview and you never give me, you don't even tell me. And it's like you're gone. Like the company went out of business. Like what happened? And no one ever gets back to you. That's the hurt. And that's when you tell people about that company is horrible, right? Let me tell you about this horrible company that totally goes to me after a full day interview.
Yeah. And just a quick reminder, please hold off on the LinkedIn URLs until the dedicated networking power hour. I love the enthusiasm, but we're just gonna do that all at once, if you don't mind. A friend of mine actually just went through an interview process, which is interesting, which actually they're still in. The recruiter had dinged them by accident, which is always a great look. And I think sometimes miscommunications as well is something that we've all seen, that perhaps having, a system of record helps circumvent some of those really kind of just nasty, like, you're telling somebody you're out and it's actually one of your shortlisted two or three candidates that you might want to hire for a senior role. Um, Dan, I don't know if you've seen anything along the lines of this sort of, next generation, millennials, Gen Z, how the expectations changed, do you think, around candidate experience in the last couple of years?
What's interesting is that we've noticed that Gen Z has seen the absolute worst of us, so their expectations are on the ground. I mean, we shut down the world the year that we're supposed to graduate and said, "Guess what? You get nothing." So, like, it's been really disappointing to see how things have changed from millennial to Gen Z, where millennials are actively bringing up, "This is not right. I should not be treated like this." Where Gen Z's like, "Well, I guess this just sucks too." And what we've actually seen is just such a huge change where they're not only looking to do things about it, but just becoming their own entrepreneurs. So what I've actually seen is their expectations are so low, but so is their patience. And they're like, this is not for
Anything that you've seen companies do to address that, kind of be best in class?
me. I think some of the more interesting things, I mean, no company has solved the big problem, which is supply and demand. And now we have AI speaking to AIs because everyone uses ChatGPT to write a resume, and then every company uses an ATS to scan and rank those ChatGPT resumes. And then you have the AI applicant, the AI doing the mass applying of the ChatGPT resumes to the ATS. So we've seen never before numbers of candidates. So there was one company I was working with in November that had 37,000 applications within 2 days. So there's no possible way that this can be managed. So what I've seen and what I partner with on companies is to, one, try to implement whatever possible to manage that first intake, but more so than that, just have a much more developed process of how you go through it. Because I find a lot of companies don't actually know how to run an interview process. They don't know why this person is on the interview panel, how long this is going to take, what's the feedback for, how do we remove biases from this, why do we need 11 rounds of interviews, why are we doing an all-day interview, like what specifically do you need, why do you need it, what are the questions that you're going to ask, how is that free from bias, and let's make a decision.
Yeah. Tom, I'm wondering if you have any insights into how companies are leveraging AI and automation for the good of the candidate experience. Obviously, it seems like a very pervasive problem these days is candidates leveraging AI and sort of, blasting the world. It's like the easy apply on, Indeed or Monster or LinkedIn, whatever the kind of the first ones to do that. It was a step change in the number of applicants you might get. And now it seems like there's another step change that's happened. But what about on the TA side and leveraging these sorts of technologies and processes?
Yeah, look, there's loads of things we're seeing people do. I think that the thing that's kind of interesting is like agree with everything that's been said so far. We sort of see that as actually an opportunity to kind of differentiate, though, as a result of some of the kind of newfangled candidate behavior we're seeing, especially with applicant volumes ticking up, right? And I think like one example of that we love seeing is in the real world is obviously applicant volumes are going up, people are mass applying with ChatGPT and all the things that have just been said. But what's happening is that because they're doing that, they're not doing the research, they're not understanding more about the businesses, they don't even know what job they've applied for, bluntly, often. And I think it's quite polarizing when we talk about Gen Z, because you've got these extreme research candidates at the very upper echelons of the job market, and then you've just got the volume play where they don't know what they've applied for. Actually, that creates an opportunity, because then in your communication and in your sequencing and actually in your automated email nurtures, are you reminding them what job they applied for? When I invite Kerry to interview 2-3 days after she applied, she doesn't know what the job is. Can I put the job description in the email? Can I remind her why she wants this job and not one of the 70 other responses that she's had from her 37,000 applicants? Like, there is actually an opportunity to leverage tools to just deliver a great candidate experience in spite of this. I think most organizations just aren't investing enough time in understanding what candidate behaviors actually are today, if that makes any sense.
It sure does. Yeah. It's interesting because I think you can be frustrated by the influx of resumes, but it just sort of is what it is, right? And so it's like, all right, how do we operate in this world? And Tom, if you wouldn't mind, one of the things I was excited to have you on is to show us just sort of like in action, like maybe one or two of these sort of workflows and like how we can actually leverage automation within TA, generally speaking, perhaps in the candidate experience. Just for me, it's sort of like much more real to see the tool in process. I don't know if you're able to do a quick screen share.
Yeah, sure. Look, I can just take 5 minutes. I'll do that right now. I think, can we see my screen all right?
Got
Yeah.
it.
Cool. So I'm going to skip through. This is a dashboard. I'm going to be really respectful of time. We've got a whole bunch of automations. These are real world automations in our actual Pinpoint account. Obviously, we use our own product. Just give you a couple of examples, and some of them will play into some of the stuff we've actually talked about in the past 10 minutes. So this one, real quick. So we have this workflow automation builder tool. It's pretty extensible. We're really excited about it. And I think when we hear people talk about AI, we're really excited. We're doing a lot in AI too. Often what they're asking for is automation. And so actually this kind of plays into that, right? So this example is basically Pinpoint will automatically check every application when it comes in. It'll screen the location for us. We'll check if they're in a time zone or a country that's applicable for the role that we're hiring for. If they aren't, then we're going to move them to rejected. We're going to send them a rejection email that's personalized and that's relevant to the reason they were rejected. And we're going to delay that rejection by 2 days so that they don't feel like some bot has just immediately rejected them and given them a bad experience. If they are in the right location, we'll check for sponsorship. Do they need work authorization? Do they need a visa and other things? And again, if that role in question isn't one where we can support that, we'll move them to rejected. We'll send them a very different email outlining the reasons for the rejection. We'll also delay that for 2 days. We'll tag the candidate, put them in the talent pipeline, right? And so this is processing thousands of candidates a day often. But it means that we're spending time on candidates that actually fit the criteria rather than not, right? That's one example. I think another one, when we talk about huge candidate volumes, we are really sensitive to making sure that we give a good candidate experience. We're actually speaking to people. So when we're creating a new job, when someone's applying for a role, we'll check if
Hey,
the
Tom,
job they
sorry
apply.
to interrupt. Are you able to zoom in at all? Okay,
Is that
awesome.
better?
Thank you. Yeah, that's
Sorry,
perfect.
guys.
No
Sorry,
worries.
team. Should have done that. But yeah, so like in this example, what we're seeing is if the application number for a specific vacancy has exceeded 500, which by the way is, as we've discussed, very common now, we'll actually put the job on hold automatically and then email every one of those candidates and let them know. So you can, and I can click into this and you can see, we'll send them an automatic update and it will literally say, thanks for applying. Due to a really high volume of applicants, we're pausing new submissions. We're going to review all of these. It might take us up to 2 weeks. Expect to hear from us. Thanks so much. And then what it's also going to do is create a task for the recruiter to remind them to go and follow up with those pending applications within a 2 week period and make sure they're doing the things that they need to be doing, right? And so simple things, but like how are we trying to manage that sort of supply and demand and comms problem without setting ourselves up to fail? I think there's more here, and these can get super complicated around talent pipeline nurturing. So if we're rejecting someone, but they got a certain distance through the application process, we'll tag them, we'll move them into the talent pipeline. And then we'll automatically set them up with welcome emails and then a nurture email sequence every 30 days, every 60 days, every 90 days to keep them engaged. There's more about no interview rejection. So for example, here, what this is saying is, hey, if you've applied for a job, when I'm reviewing you as a candidate, rather than having to click on the candidate, reject the candidate, send them an email, tag the reason why, and so on, actually, we can just load our candidates up into a queue, tag them, and move on, and it will do everything for us. So like if I came in here to an example job, obviously these candidates are all fake. I can just click here and queue all of my candidates up. It's going to load them all in. And as I do that, I can literally just apply a tag and I can say, hey, this person doesn't have startup experience. And then they're done. They're going to get rejected. They'll get automatically emailed. It'll all happen in a flow. And so it just makes it much easier for us to go through these things at huge volumes, right? And so I'm not going to bore you all. I think like we have a couple of case studies about how people that we work with are using automations to really tackle candidate experience at scale. And hopefully we'll get the chance to share those with you later. But I'll kind of hand it back to you for further audience discussion and stuff.
Yeah, thanks for going through that, and I'll put a link in the chat if you want to kind of learn more about Pinpoint and see it live. I've done a demo, and I think what's interesting about what you just shared is that it seems it's extremely thoughtful, and it's like, oh my God, like I'd love to do those automations, but like I don't know if our team could do it. It takes like 7 minutes to set up one of these automations. Like it's crazy. It's just like you're basically, it's super intuitive. You're just like clicking like, if this, then that. If the person is not a good fit, then 2 days later, send them a rejection letter. If they are, then, set up this task with the recruiter. Like it's extremely intuitive. So thanks for sharing that, because I think it just makes it so much more real to see kind of how these things are in practice.
Can I just add one quick thing to that, which is
Yeah.
only just that the thing that we love about workflow automations without overselling the feature is we get to see what folks are doing with it, right? Like it's powerful, but what's more interesting is how people use it. And so we have this big template library that we want to share with folks, but also be like, reach out on LinkedIn, send our team a note, like whether you're a Pinpoint customer or not, we'd love to share some insights on like what we're seeing people do, because some of the most high value things that sort of move the needle on candidate experience are actually reasonably trivial for you all to implement. It just requires the thought and someone to kind of nudge and kick in the right way.
Awesome. And we'll be sure to link, we're going to send a takeaways doc after this. We'll be sure to link to some of those resources and case studies, as well as Pinpoint itself. Dan and Carrie, I'd love to kick it back to y'all. And, one of the things that I think are maybe sort of the goals of these, or of candidate experience in general, is how do you empower people to become brand ambassadors for your organization? And I don't know if you have any kind of stories or tactics around this topic.
Go ahead, Dan.
Dr. Curry? No, you please first.
No. I just wanted to go back though on Tom before we get to there. Sorry, because what I loved about what you showed, Tom, was the detail of the note. Like we're pausing the recruiting process. We're pausing because we have too many applicants, or we have so many. We have to take a pause so we can be thoughtful. Just all of that adding to, instead of saying thank you, we received it by. Like just adding 3 more sentences is so powerful, because again, it feels like you care about me and you actually have thought about me or thought about my experience, which means as a company, you probably think about me as an employee more so than maybe a company that doesn't send me anything. And so it just, every step shows how much you care. And I just love that you can do that. And even thinking of waiting 2 days to send it makes someone wrote it in the chat too. Like you're more thoughtful versus I get a rejection 2 minutes later, which doesn't feel the best. So I think that process, and then HR, I'm reading the chat. How do you have a process in hiring? How do you make sure everyone knows that and is trained? And that's going to feel like a really good candidate experience too when you have that process. But that's not the question you asked, Phil, but I just had to say something. I'm sorry. But how do you create brand ambassadors? I mean, you got to have a good culture to create a good brand ambassador, because I'm just saying, if you don't treat your employees well currently, they're not going to be the best brand ambassadors to find internal talent or to find talent for you. But that's my quick glib. I'm sure Dan has a more thoughtful, but I was like, dude, you don't treat your current people right, they're not going to recruit for you. So
No, I actually think that's pretty fantastic, and it just sort of manifests. I'm going to kick myself if I don't say it, so I'm just going to take 30 seconds on all the ghosting comments. I can't stress enough. Please do not blame the recruiters. The recruiters are the easiest target because that is who you interface the most with. And I've just seen, especially over the pandemic, company after company mistreat recruiters. They were the first ones all laid off. They were the first ones brought back on a part-time basis, given triple, quadruple the workload. And imagine how excited you are that you send your application, you write your cover letter, you find the person on LinkedIn, you sign a message, and then multiply you times 250. Because that's started to get to the scale of applications that we started to see. And I know every recruiter absolutely hates the idea of ever leaving anyone. So please just realize that if companies were actually accurately investing within full candidate experience, they would have so many more people as relates to managing these communications. As it relates to branding, what's funny is I think it just comes to exactly what Dr. Carey said. If you have good employees, if the employees embody the culture, that tends to happen automatically. There was one company I interviewed with that sort of set the bar for me because I'd never experienced something like this before in my life. Every interview was spent 5 minutes of them saying that they researched me. They called out specific things on my resume that they were like, I really want to know more about this. And it wasn't just, the person just saw it 2 minutes ago. This was like, oh, tell me about the first time you worked with the data organization at WebMD. That must have been exciting. The third interview was a live exercise together. I went all the way up to the final round. I was rejected. And in the rejection email, they pointed out what every interviewer said was my best strengths. And I was like, 8 years later, I remember that as the best interview experience I've ever had. I have not seen any other company do anything close.
Wow. It's amazing. And, what you just said, Dan, and also this whole, even like, Carrie, you called out this like 2 minute versus 2 day rejection. It all comes down, I think, to like empathy and also understanding your customer, which in this case is candidates and eventually employees. And a friend of mine was the TA leader for a company that went from 300 to 3,000 employees in a year. And one of the core things that I was a consultant for this company that we did was we sat down with people that worked there and understood employee value propositions. Why do you work here? What's good? What do you tell your friends about working here? And then also kind of what's your feedback on the candidate experience? And then we went to people who were rejected too. And we talked to them and we just sort of understood like, just give it to us raw, right? Like I'm a third party. I don't work for the company. I just want to understand on an anonymized basis, like what was good and bad. And obviously you're getting some of that feedback on Glassdoor, but it takes a lot for somebody many times to write something on Glassdoor. And so Dan, just like you had to say something, I feel like I had to say that this is something that's worthwhile to just really continuously understand your customer. Probably want to have a couple of these interviews on a monthly or quarterly basis to just figure out where are we doing well and where do we need help in the process here. I think, Dan, it's amazing to hear about this process. And I would imagine that there's a lot of training that goes into that. How do you get your recruiting team, your hiring managers to take this time to then resurface those facts so it's obvious to the candidate that the research was done? How do each of you think about how training, it's one thing to have a plan, but then how do you actually put it in place? And maybe it's training in the applicant tracking system, maybe it's training in interview tactics. How do you all think about training for the recruiting team as well as the hiring managers?
So I had the opportunity to speak with the CEO a year later. We ended up meeting at like a network event. I told him and I mentioned to him like about my experience, and he just blew me away because I think it was the first CEO I ever spoke to saying, if I don't physically and I don't very, very candidly tell my team and tell my company how important recruiting is to me, no one's going to do it. They're all just going to yes me to death. I'll get a one-on-one exception. People are going to ask me for this or that, and it's just going to be just enough to do well. So I needed to partner with a great head of HR who wanted to treat any candidate who was interested in coming to our company that we wanted to interview was going to be given the same glove treatment as our customers and as our employees. So by setting that standard, making that his very clear directive to his executive team, it wasn't sales, not marketing, not technology, not IT. How are we treating people, both the employees as well as recruiting and interviewing? And so once you have that, it becomes so much easier because you're not fighting an uphill battle. This is the CEO's directive. Now everyone's on board. How do I help? All of a sudden, it was the first time I've heard of like, oh yeah, our head of marketing helped to sort of train HR on how to be good marketers, on how to generate excitement. Data people were coming to help as related to start building out some data tags as related to try to getting like this input. I'm like this is what most companies are missing for HR recruiting, and interviewing is kind of given barely enough, do enough to do your job, maybe do it as a moderate investment, but to that level of investment was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, I
And
would. Oh, go ahead, sir.
I
Sorry.
was just going to call it. Thank you to Brenda in the comments for sharing a different opinion about what Dan said about recruiters and whatnot. And I think it's nice to have a difference of opinions. And I really appreciate when somebody has the courage to do that. So thank you to Brenda. Sorry, go ahead, Carrie.
Oh no, I just wanted to say, Dan, I was thinking it, you were saying it of how important the leadership team is and how they set that tone. And so we're talking about, I'm thinking we're talking all about this candidate experience and being empathic and being caring. However, you still need to match your company. If your company's not overly empathic and caring, I'm not saying you be rude to the candidates, but you also don't want to give them a false sense of, yes, we care about you at every step. And then they get there and they're like, oh my God, you actually don't care. And so you do have to match your company. So some of us sometimes in HR, like we should be this, but if you're not, then don't give the candidate mixed messages. That culture fit is so important. And so maybe you don't write an overly flowery, lovely email because your company is a little more aggressive. So you got to match that. And you got to get the leadership involved. And once they're involved, then the training's easier. But like Dan said, my goodness, that was such an amazing example. Some CEOs are like, just hire me 15 people and I don't care. So you really have to know your company and match the culture to your candidate experience as well.
I love it. A friend of mine's interviewing for a company that the stated values are like basically like we work extremely hard. We're a championship team, but like all this, like
Yeah.
very much like this is like a grind. And the candidate experience is like everybody shows up 2 minutes late for interviews because they're so busy and they're rushing through. Like it's very aligned, I think, with what's it like to work there, which is it's annoying to be the candidate and somebody's always 2 minutes late on your, seventh interview for the company, but at the same time, you're getting a great insight into what's like to work at this company.
Exactly.
Tom,
Exactly.
any thoughts on training?
Yeah, look, I think obviously we're kind of lucky because we build recruitment software, so we sort of cheat, right? Like we people who work here are predisposed to actually care about this stuff and take it very seriously. And I think we think it's extremely important to the point where on someone's first day we talk to them about the importance of recruitment, how we think about their role as a hiring manager, what that needs to look like. And obviously everybody's been through the process themselves here, and we're a relatively young business, and so they've seen that. I think like we're amazed at the amount of feedback we get where candidates a week in or 2 weeks in just say, this actually is like you said it was going to be. And that seems like a real novelty to the points that have already been made, right? And I think like that surprises me. And I think to Kerry's point on transparency and sort of aligning the interview process with the reality, that is our culture. We spend the vast majority of all of the interviews that we have with candidates trying to convince them not to join. And that literally is the way that we think about it, right? We're here to convince you not to be here. We're going to start by letting you ask us loads of questions, and we kind of flip the entire experience on its head because that's the expectation of really, really, really high caliber candidates now. And we're not doing volume hiring, right? We want the best of the best. And yeah, it's kind of just so heavily built into the culture. I think if you've been through it, you know what the expectations are. Hopefully, it wound you enough that you feel compelled to deliver an experience like that for the next folks.
For what it's worth, we do the same thing where it's basically like, here are the reasons why you would not want to work here. And then I've actually taken our internal survey data on me as the CEO and the company, and I'm just like, here's like a 30-page like deck that you can go through that's like, here are the good things about working with Phil, here are the not good things about working with Phil. Because that's the reality. And I'm not gonna, it just is what it is. So we have our much anticipated networking happy hour happening in one question, but I am curious to get each person's opinion on how much automation is too much in from a TA perspective. I think we already know from a candidate perspective, like people have kind of gone off the deep end a bit here, but when do we start to lose the human element? Does it matter on the persona that we're trying to attract? What are your thoughts?
Again, we're so polite. I mean, I'm like the least AI focused of the group, so I'll let the group go first.
I'll opine that I think it's too soon to tell. I think everyone thought we were using AI when we weren't. There were people that were actively telling me how AI was working for ATSs, and I was like, I don't think that's right yet. I don't think we even have any real use cases yet or business cases yet. So I think we're still in the experimentation phase, and I'm starting to see final cases of like good data of like 6 months to a year of collection of how that worked and what that worked. I just think there's going to be too much nuance as relates to what specifically the company is looking for that might inform that answer.
I can take a different approach. I think like I'd say there's two things, right? One is I'm like a strong advocate for not trying to deploy AI or automation in areas where you don't have to do something particularly often. So what I mean by that is the first thing everybody did in the ATS market in AI was we can write your job descriptions for you. Like that, I think is terrible, being honest. You don't write that many job descriptions. They're typically templated. You typically don't have that many different ones. And your job description is your billboard. It is the opportunity for you to differentiate in a very, very, very crowded and frothy market. Having AI kind of bring that down to the lowest common denominator is doing you a disservice, and it's a bit lazy in my opinion. So, like, I would be careful about that. I would also just be careful on screening, all right? And I can see a question from Alison that maybe we'll get the chance to tackle in more depth later. But um, when we were doing the workflow automation examples I just showed you, we're using like very binary and explicit things to screen candidates out. Are you entitled to work? You said no, therefore this happens. What we're not doing is like, and we do pass CVs obviously and extract all the data so it's searchable, but what we're not necessarily doing is going, well, Dan's CV and Kerry's CV has these words in this order and therefore they're unqualified for the role. So we're going to throw them in the bin straight. Like, I think that people are rushing to do that, and I understand why for all the reasons we've articulated, but there is a real danger that you miss the real kind of diamond in the rough. And I think those are the hires we're all here to find in reality, right? So just kind of proceed with caution, I guess, is all I'd say. Maybe the last thing, and I don't want to hog the mic, is just like when people automate, it's very easy. You can log into Pinpoint, look at the automation, see that's run 5,000 times this week. It's easy to forget each one of those 5,000 people is a real person looking for a real job, potentially moving their family across the country or doing something meaningful in their life. They aren't a row in the spreadsheet, it's a person. So think about not just how do you make your own life easier, but how does the automation impact them? Um, I'll stop talking now, but yeah, hopefully that's clear.
Oh, I was thinking that, Tom, you said like proceed with caution. And from an HR perspective, from a legal perspective, I sit in California. So we do have a lot of things that go on, and some of the other states don't have. But there's already, someone just sent me a lawsuit with Workday, and someone discriminated, who was discriminated against using AI tools. And so you do have to, in HR, we have to have yes, this is helpful to send the emails and to help us maybe with a first pass. But then how do we have some human decision making and make sure that we're doing things consistently? Because it will be ripe for lawsuits for sure if you get super, and I'll just call it lazy, and you're like, AI does everything great. They just gave me this best candidate, and I put in all these filters that are somehow biased and discriminatory. I didn't mean to, but now it is here, and now I'm in the lawsuit category. So there is this proceed with caution for sure from an HR perspective.
Yeah, without a doubt. And there's sort of like the moral proceed with caution. Each row in the spreadsheet is a person, and then there's the legal one, which is also quite important for people who like to keep their jobs. With that, let's do the networking happy hour here. So if you are so inclined, drop your LinkedIn URL into the chat. This is basically an open invitation for somebody to connect with you who's also interested in this topic of candidate experience. I would recommend open up, 5 or 10 of these links, connect with a couple of folks. Maybe you do a coffee chat. Maybe there's somebody where it's like, hey, you're also the head of TA for a hospital system or a manufacturing company or whatever the case may be. What are you guys doing? How have you run your candidate interviews? How have you figured out how to iterate on this and understand what's important, what's not? There's a lot, obviously, that can be addressed within the overall candidate experience. And this network is phenomenal. We've, again, people have gotten jobs out of our networking power hours and made all sorts of other really valuable connections. So please take the time to connect with a couple of folks here. Um, while we're doing that, we'll also launch a quick feedback poll. Let us know how we're doing. We are running a few of these per month now, and we think we're doing a good job, but we can obviously always do better. And so let us know your unvarnished opinion about this webinar. What would you like to see? How can we make these more valuable? Maybe what are topics that you would like to see coming up? We do have a couple of events in the hopper here, and I'll wait for the chat to chill out in just a second to post RSVP links for these. But next week, we actually have two speakers now from K&L Gates, where we're going to talk about the legal aspects of DEI. So there's obviously been in the United States executive orders around diversity, equity, inclusion. The Wall Street Journal yesterday actually had an article where the person who's in charge of enforcing this is basically just, he said, I'm looking on Twitter all day long for people who are bragging about how many underrepresented people that they have at their company. I think like the city of Chicago now is being prosecuted because the mayor basically said, hey, we've got, a black woman in this position, a black woman in that position. And they're like, maybe that's unfair. So there's just a lot of tripwires out there, and some of them are probably, more legally robust than others. But Ted and his colleague Haley are both partners at K&L Gates. They've got an amazing presentation that usually is only available to their clients that pay them $1,600 an hour. We've convinced them to give it to our community, and so we're going to go through all these legal aspects of DEI programs. If your company's still running one, you want to kind of stay out of the crosshairs, I highly, highly recommend checking that out. And I will put the RSVP link in now that it's slightly relaxed in the chat. The other one is going to be an amazing presentation for anybody who is basically looking for people ops, kind of next generation strategies, processes, using automation, etc. It's going to be another great presentation to join. So highly recommend checking those out. And again, we're doing these every week or two. They're all SHRM certified, HRCI. They've all got the networking. Sometimes we even have giveaways. Carrie was nice enough to give away her book a few sessions back, which is pretty cool. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. We got so many awesome questions throughout this. And in addition to that, when folks RSVP'd, and I would love to try to get through as many as we can in the next 10 minutes or so. So I'm just going to throw these up here, and whoever has you don't have to be nice anymore. You can be sharp elbowed, you want to jump in, you want to talk over Carrie, feel free. But we'll just try to answer as many as we can. And please, if you've got other questions, put them in the chat. We'll try to get to as many as we can. First question, how do you keep a candidate engaged when the hiring process is going longer than desired?
I normally go with open communication. I think the goal is to just try to be direct as possible versus keeping engagement, because you can't manage that. What you can manage is the communication to the data and the details that you know. I tend to trend far more honest than most companies would like me to be, so I make a phenomenal consultant. But what I find over and over again is that if you treat people like human beings and just say, listen, we got a new CEO, we have a new shakeup, all hiring is paused and frozen. I'm really sorry. I'll keep you posted as soon as I get anything, versus like what most hiring managers will say, well, just keep them warm. Like, what does that mean? We'll just call them every week and tell them continuously that maybe next week there'll be something. I think just being flat out and direct and communicative about what's happening is normally going to be the best bet.
100% on that. Yeah. Be as transparent as you can.
We call it the no update, right? But it's just like actually giving people, just keeping them transparently updated. And then I think someone put in the chat that they love texting. Like, I think that's a thing. Like, we use different communication methods to keep people updated in different ways, right? But just constantly talk to them is something to do.
We've got two pinpoint specific questions. One, I think, Tom, you've already answered, which is what HRSs does Pinpoint integrate with? And I think you said there's something like 30 HRSs, which we
Yeah,
can do.
I
Is
don't want
Workday one
to
of them?
yes, it is. I don't want to
Yes.
hold the mic on that one. Pinpointhq.com/integrations. There's a list. There's a very long list. Happy to discuss it privately, but like all of the major players from big to small, we integrate with out of the box.
Awesome. Let me put this link back to Pinpoint here in the chat, in case you want to go check it out. The other Pinpoint question is, it's listening to you talk about Pinpoint, very encouraging. I want to be specific though. Do these prompts preclude that recruiters will only see the resume application if they meet all criteria? Thinking about proactive talent searches for the future, how does that applicant get set up in the talent pipeline? Is it done by skills, job, domain, department? I have a lot of recruitment experience, but little with AI and automation in the ATS.
Sure, Alison, thanks for the question. I think the honest answer is it depends what you want to do, and you can set it up as you see fit, right? So, like in the examples I gave you, we are automatically screening out candidates that don't meet those criteria, i.e., the recruiter does not see them. But the reason for that is that they are not us assuming or not assuming or inferencing skills. They are, we could not employ you in this instance because you need work support or you're in the wrong time zone or whatever. And so, in that specific example I showed, we don't see the candidates, but for very legitimate reasons because we couldn't employ them otherwise. When we think about moving folks into the talent pipeline, again, that's really a derivative of how the automation is set up. In the examples we use, we'll tag candidates automatically with skills based on their rejections. And then when we open future requisitions in the future, we have a talent pipeline section that will kind of proactively pull those folks in and say, hey, Kerry got this far through a role previously, and she has Ruby on Rails skills and so on. And so but it's quite extensible, so it's kind of a case-by-case example.
What are some low lift but high impact changes HR teams can make this quarter to improve candidate experience?
My thought is, and I consistently say this over and over again, you have to focus on building strategic interviews. You can't just interview the same way that you do anymore. I think Tom brought up such a great point as relates to just redoing job descriptions. And then when you think about who the interview panel is, like I'm so surprised when I consult with new companies that people don't talk to each other about this. This is what this candidate needs. Here are some good questions to ask. Here's some things I want to avoid. If you could focus on this topic, I would appreciate it. And there's just no real strategy around who is on the panel, what they're doing on the panel, and then making sure that the review is both timely and as free from bias as possible.
I would just say, ask your candidate. I'm being rude now, Kerry. Sorry, I was asked to be rude. Ask your candidates. Like, do surveys and actually read the responses and listen to the candidates and do the things that they give you feedback on. But just like actually go through the process of doing the surveys and asking.
I consider it overlapping talking, so it's not even an interruption. But anyway, that's how I look at it. But I would say one thing that you can do is make sure you can really articulate the culture of your company. I know it sounds like, oh, duh, I can do it, but can you really like have a top 10 thing of like the person has to be either really thoughtful or super risk taking? Like think of it in that way. So then you can help, that will help with your candidate experience. And Phil, I didn't time it this way, but I just have to give this little quote. As I went into LinkedIn to copy my profile, this is the first thing that was posted. This is so funny. This person writes, the Pope was hired in 2 days, and you need a senior person to interview with 6 different people and then tell them a decision won't be made for weeks. This gets filed under terrible employee experience.
That's pretty good.
I thought that was hilarious. I'm like, oh my God, you're right. They did hire a Pope. Sorry. They did pick a Pope in like 2 days. So anyway, I just thought that was great. And I did not time that, but it popped up.
Yeah, that's awesome. Something tells me they might have thought a little bit about it before they picked the vote, but it's a good point. It's a good point. As a nonprofit, how can I meet candidate expectations on a budget?
Say that again.
No one's
communication.
Communication is free.
Yeah, I mean that you're essentially just doing that. And just managing expectations and communications, and it really is the only thing you can do at a nonprofit.
I think I'm kind of picking the same narrative up, but like just be transparent and share as much preemptively as possible, right? I think lots of people fall into this trap of Daniel's asked a question, so I'm going to answer that one. And then Kerry's asked a question, I'm going to answer that one. Like, if you're seeing patterns in candidate asks and behaviors, just create a little section in your job description that preemptively answers them. It makes it much more scalable. It's a better experience, and people just appreciate the authenticity.
Any tips on the hiring process for senior or C-level candidates?
I will tell you that I love to do a deeper personality assessment. I love the caliper assessment. I know there's tons out there. That's just the one I like. And really figuring out, because at that point, technical expertise, while that's nice, and maybe I'm a great operations person, but like if you can't gel with that executive team, like you really have to get under the hood, as they like to say, about what motivates that team and how is that person. I could be great for one executive team, but I could be just poison for another executive team. So really figuring that out for an executive hire. Don't get so concerned about what they've done in the past. I mean, you'd hope that they know what they're doing at that level, but like, how are they going to vibe with the rest of the leadership team?
I can't stress enough, anytime we do any kind of executive hiring, it's focus on leadership development, how they grow their team, how they think of leadership, how they think of org design, how they partner with HR, how they think about handling performance issues, how they scale. That to me is far more critical than their ability to sell or to market, because to Dr. Carey's point, they have that already.
I agree with everything both of those much smarter than me people just said. I think that the thing I'd add to it, just in a completely different way, is compensate people for their time, which might be controversial. But like, we take the executive hiring process exceptionally seriously, the same way hopefully everybody does. Executives and senior folk are also very busy, and we'll ask them to produce materials. We want a plan from you. We want a strategy. We want a review. We want you to engage with our business. For us to expect that output from someone, we feel it's right that we compensate them for that time at a reasonable rate. What we get from it is way higher caliber candidates engaging far more with the process. And the cost of doing that relative to the cost of the process itself and the candidate is just insignificant. But the goodwill it buys and the output it buys is just much greater. We don't then feel guilty about the process taking a little longer. So just pay for people's time and be respectful.
How much would you say you pay for a given hire?
In the context of compensating them for their time during the process.
Yeah.
It depends on the role and what we're asking them to do, but we would essentially compute their hourly rate and pay them however many hours we would expect. And we'll be quite particular about that. So if you're going to produce a strategy document that you're going to pitch to a 4-person interview panel on a 90-day plan for this role, we think that's going to take 2 days of your time. So we'll go work out what 2 days of your time costs, and we'll pay you that whether you're successful or not.
Oh, I love it. This kind of dovetails nicely actually with a question in the question chat here from Evangeline, which is basically, what are some other kind of not often talked about tactics that you can employ throughout the candidate experience? Mission statement, photos, different things in the thanks for applying emails, the JDs, resources, anything that you've kind of seen work.
I can bring some nerdy data to this. So we obviously power career sites, so we see what works and what doesn't. I think the two biggest needle movers for us, almost irrelevant of sector, are more information about the people you're going to be working with, particularly the hiring manager for the role, and a very transparent overview of the hiring process itself. What are the stages? What's entailed in each stage? What are the timeline expectations, and so on? I think if you preemptively showcase those things, we see like a double-digit increase in on-page conversion on career sites, but regardless of industry segment.
There's something that I've experienced myself several times that I really agree with, but it's so controversial because there's certain people that just refuse, is the idea of sending questions early. I was interviewing at one point. I consulted with one company who did this, and I thought that was such a phenomenal game changer, because it's like, we're not looking to test the candidate like it's a pop quiz. Like, of course they should be well prepared for the questions that we're going to ask, and that lets us dive far more into like compelling stories and gets us into like deep topics that are off of it. And I thought that was just phenomenal.
Yeah, I love it. Do you all think that candidate experience impacts retention, or how does it impact retention? I would imagine the answer is probably yes.
Yes.
I think it's the biggest predictor of retention, in my opinion, right? Like it's the biggest way to move the needle because ultimately you're trying to assess people's fit with the organization. I think what you're not going to do typically is bend the culture and operating principles of a business to suit an individual. So the job is to find an individual that does well in those things. And I think the more we invest in candidate experience, the more likely that outcome will be positive. So I think it's huge.
And also, when you think of when people ask you about your company or your job, it's when you're looking for a job or when you just got a job. And that's when you're telling everyone that, oh, I love this company, or yeah, I got this job, but I don't know. I don't even have a laptop. I don't have anything. I don't know why. I think they mishired me for this job. Like that's when you're telling everyone. And so that period of time is so important. And that sets the stage then for how you're going to talk about your company for the rest of the time. So it's incredibly important.
I'm going to offer a slight disagreement just for fun, because I agree fundamentally. I think in some cases you may be able to cover the gap if you have enough cloud. So like Apple is known for being huge, huge, huge. Everything is closed. You don't get any information on the people you're interviewing with. You get no information in prep. Everything is super, super secretive, but they have amazing retention. Netflix is much the same. Their interview processes are known as being really, really clunky, way overloaded, not enough detail. Everything seems to be sort of plot in backwards, and communication is sort of distorted. But they have the absolute highest retention in the world. But it's also because they pay all salaries at 1.5 to double what the market rate is. So I think if you can make up for it with something else, I'm not ever saying that you should not focus on candidate retention, but versus or the candidate experience versus that's where I see some potential disconnects between retention and candidate experience.
Oh my God, Daniel, I was just thinking of maybe I married a 90-year-old, but he had like $10 million. And so that was okay. So he made up for it. The age wasn't the same, it didn't matter, but you're right. I'll go to Apple, I'll go to Amazon. Amazon can treat me horribly during the interview and can make me feel small, but I'll still go because it's Amazon. You're so right. It's
Right.
like, what's your EVP? What's your value? Yeah.
Yep.
But I would assume those are probably the exceptions.
100%. But it's still super noteworthy, I think. Thank you everybody for attending this session. We're going to send the recording, the takeaways doc, the credits, all that good stuff. If you have any feedback for us, please let us know. Um, Folks always follow me afterwards. If you're interested in our advisor service to help find the right HR technology, you could use that QR code. I'll put a link into the description as well. It's a free service. It's rated 4.9 star rating for a reason. And yeah, I just want to thank the panelists here. You guys brought it today as usual. Amazing takeaways from, how do we leverage AI and automation, actually seeing a product live, and how do we like brass tacks, like implement this and execute, thinking about the human experience. I loved the discussion in the chat from the kind of contrarian takes to the questions, the insights. Thank you, everybody involved. Of course, the panelists, but also the folks who joined on the call. And hopefully, we'll see you for another webinar that's relevant to you, and we can keep building our community here. So, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
And of course, we need 7 seconds of awkward silence at the end as Zoom shuts down and we all stare into the abyss and wonder, is Philip pressing the button?
I could talk about a 90-year-old for $10 million if you want to talk about dating. No, I'm just joking.
Right.
Did she really marry a 90-year-old for $10 million? I will let you try to figure that out.
Something to contemplate.
Amazing.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.